Good evening, friends. Welcome to the episode 19 of the Career Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Gopal, and I'm thrilled to have you all with me for yet another exciting episode. Earlier this week, we celebrated the International Day of Podcasters, and it gave me a chance to reflect on the incredible journey I've had of hosting this podcast. What started as an idea a few years ago of sharing inspiring stories of career reinvention turned into a platform where we can explore the highs and lows and the turning points of remarkable individuals who have navigated the significant career shifts. Hosting this podcast has been deeply rewarding experience for me, one that has been filled with powerful conversations, insightful lessons, and countless moments of inspiration. But none of this would have been possible without you, the listeners. Your support, your engagement, and your willingness to tune in and share this journey with us has made it possible for the podcast to be as successful as it is. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being part of this journey with me. For those who are tuning in for the first time, Career Shifts is a podcast where we explore the journeys of individuals who have successfully navigated the career shifts and career transitions. Each episode brings in new heights of stories that I hope will inspire you to think about your own career path. For those who have been with us before, you know what's coming. As is our tradition, I want to kick off the episode today again with a story. I've always believed that reinvention is an art, one that each one of us practices at various stages of our lives and careers. A couple of years ago, when I left my rewarding and successful role at EY to join IIM Ahmedabad, I wasn't entirely sure of what the future held. But I was driven by a sense of purpose and desire to explore new avenues. Was it easy? Not at all. Was it worth it? Absolutely. The 2 years that I spent there, setting up the School of Public Policy, opened countless opportunities, broadened my perspectives, expanded my horizons, enriched my network, and all about experiences that I can't probably share in one episode today. Reinvention requires both vulnerability, courage, and today I have the privilege of speaking with someone who has masterfully navigated this process throughout his career. Please join me in welcoming D N Prasad as we explore his remarkable journey across global organizations, his experiments with his careers, and a lot more. So, whether you're a leader looking to grow or wanting to seek inspiration for your next career move, this episode, I'm sure, is going to be packed with invaluable insights and actionable takeaways. So, let's dive in. Good evening. Good evening, DNP. How are you doing?
Very well, Gopal. Thank you. And my own journey with career shifts has been really interesting. So, from a viewer to being a guest today. So, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. You've been someone who I have always wanted to talk, even as I started my journey with IIM Ahmedabad. I probably would have reached out to you on LinkedIn as well. One of the things that I did as I was transitioning from my HR role the to heading the School of Public Policy role was to speak to people who have done that transition. And your profile, for some reason, came up as one of the persons who had done that. So I ended up speaking to Srinivas, who happens to be our common friend, at length about how he managed that transition from consulting role um, to public policy, the bit of work that he does in that domain.
Great.
But never had the chance to speak to you. But here we are today. So thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Not at all.
Really looking
Absolutely.
forward to
My,
exploring that.
my
So
pleasure.
thank you. Before we start, do you have any opening thoughts, comments that you want to share with the audience who are listening in?
Uh, as we were chatting just before we went live,
Yeah.
conversations of this nature provides an amazing opportunity for us to share our perspectives, our experiences, which could inspire others. But as much as it's a reflection for us of our journey, and there'll be great takeaways for me personally as well. So I'm looking forward to both today. So as we always say, and in coaching as well, and I'm a practicing executive coach. Let's suspend judgments, suspend time for the next 60, 70 minutes,
Yeah,
and just soak in everything that the session has to offer.
absolutely. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of takeaways, a lot of highlights that we can discuss a lot. There are a few interesting aspects that I would definitely want to touch upon, given where we are, what we are going through as an industry, or even probably humanity, and then we can see how that conversation goes. Friends who are watching in through LinkedIn or YouTube, DNP is based out of Singapore. It's quite late there, and he's agreed to do this session even on a day when he's running a slight temperature. So thank you, DNP, for doing this for us. And please do let your questions flow. Ask your questions, share your thoughts, reflect on whatever comes to your mind through the chat. I'll pick those comments as they come along, and would be more than happy to share those questions with the DNP as well. So here's the first question from me, DNP. Um,
Sure.
I don't think the world that we are in today, we can do enough justice to be able to share who we are with a lot of people, in many ways, because of the way the nature. I mean, I was talking to Abhijit Bhaduri the other day, and he was saying that when LinkedIn started, imagine I was the first person on LinkedIn. And when you joined, we were too. Today, we have about 1 billion people on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So it's practically impossible for everyone to know everybody.
Everybody.
And I'm going to take that as the opportunity to ask you if you are able to share, your journey of where you started, the kind of shifts you have had in your career, and what do you do today? If you can just share that journey with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Gopal. Um, a couple of years ago, I was in a podcast of a similar nature, and it just struck a certain way that I introduced myself. And from then on, it's become a bit of a template. So I'm going to use that again. I'm an
Sure.
engineer by my basic qualification, an HR and OD professional by choice, a practicing executive coach by my calling, and just a very grateful soul seeking experiences and striving to make a difference to touch lives. Uh, my strongest identity, however, is that of a father, friend, and coach. And I also say that I have my wife's permission to say that. So uh, there's no one way to build a career. A lot of us have taken different paths.
Yes.
Mine has been a combination of building deep expertise in several COE functions in the people space, a lot of vertical depth, bringing it all together in leadership roles that I played in the country or across region or globally, and working on several of these leadership platforms. And therefore, everything coming together to define my career so far and then to provide me with what I call the four E's, and I'll borrow a framework that we used in GovTech, the 4E framework for development, and I've experienced that. So it's experience, it's exposure, it's education, and engagement. So all coming together. So that's how my career has been. Now, if I were to really sum up and not getting into the specifics of every role that I played across three really interesting organizations, Infosys, Google, and more recently GovTech. And then let's not forget, I also founded my own executive coaching and talent advisory practice. So if I were to sum up my career, I have built high performance teams and functions in country, regions, and globally, shaped and nurtured careers and cultures, leadership as well, led large people transformations, and I've coached and mentored extensively. So that's an elevator pitch. You know? And something that has always struck me is anything that's been at the intersection of transformation, people, and culture is what I have thrived in and has been very special to me. And in most of it, I've actively sought opportunities that way. They're the ones that challenged me to keep me up at nights, but excited me enough to get up first thing in the morning and get to work. Okay. Now, there are a couple of other things that were common if we were to look at threads. The first one was a non-negotiable for me in picking roles. Exciting roles where I could deliver impact and touch lives were a non-negotiable for me. Titles and then the perks and money and everything followed, but it was the impact of the role that I always looked at, even internally or when I was changing organizations. I haven't done too many of that. 7.5 years in Infosys, 12 years in Google, spent about 5 years and 2 months at GovTech, uh, which is an organization I just left to take a short break for about 3 months to decide before I decide what my next steps are. So
Sure.
I'm meaningfully, gainfully unemployed or enjoying a career break at this point in time as we speak.
Or planning
Uh,
your next shift, as I would call.
oh, absolutely. There is a colleague of mine here from the industry. He
Hmm.
recently did that, and he started a, a, a practice which he calls next play. So next shift, next play. That's what I'm seeking at this point. If I were to kind of take a bit of a detour, uh, my coaching firm is called Noetic Step. So
Hmm.
noetic in Latin is deep inner awakening. So as we know, awareness, self-awareness is a fundamental starting point for
Yeah.
coaching or any developmental journey. And I've always believed that journeys of that nature has to be longitudinal in nature. You take the first step, you hit a milestone, and then you're taking your next step. That's how Noetic Step came. So, in fact, in some ways, I'm
Right.
following that myself as well at this point in time. Uh, the second first principle for me when I was choosing roles was to work with smart people, work with great leaders, and in where there was a purpose.
Hmm.
With GovTech, for example, uh, we we are the leading technology agency for the Singapore government. So
Hmm.
for me, I looked at that opportunity as a platform where I could play my small part in nation building. It can't get better than that. So the purpose was really important. And then a very personal one, and I've learned through observing some great leaders that I've got a chance to work with or be led by, etc., is to always stay intellectually curious and intellectually humble. So intellectual curiosity and intellectual humility goes hand in hand, and it's a very powerful tool for us to kind of grow as professionals, leaders, coaches, what have you. So those have been some of my first principles when I looked at my career. Now, if I look at some of the milestones thereof, everything, starting my career at Infosys after my MBA, this is 25, 26 years ago. Within 10 months, I got an opportunity to move to the US. And I didn't know at that point if I could say no to the opportunity. Ended up there, 2 years, amazing experience. Moving back to India, moving to Google in 2006, moving to Singapore in 2009 for a very interesting opportunity, but very unique. And then moved to US for a year to set up first in the history of Google kind of a function in 2016. Because I was scaling my coaching work, I made a very conscious choice to come back to the region, leaving a global headquarter based role, which a lot of people thought was professional suicide, but I genuinely wanted to do that. Leaving Google, which was a big decision to start my own practice. And then when I got tapped on the shoulder by the government for this unique opportunity to serve for the last 5 years and a bit, so everything has added to who I am today and in my professional journey. And I consider some of these my milestones. I'm also a big sucker for milestones. So every year I make it a point to, they need to earn the stripes. I send
Hmm.
a personalized note to everybody who's played their part in the previous year in my growth or in my personal or professional growth. So I look at every year as a bit of a milestone where we're growing, which also kind of gives us a reflection on whether we are on the right track or have we got stagnated. Do we continue to grow? Are we continuing to be challenged by the opportunity that we have, etc.? So that's how I've shaped my career.
Oh, incredible. I mean, I know a lot of those feelings that you just shared around, how you moved. And I can definitely resonate with the whole feeling that you narrated about how you moved from Google to GovTech Singapore. Um, exactly the same emotions that I had when I was moving from EY to IIM Ahmedabad.
I
Um, because I think, I mean, in many ways, I think doing something as a bit to build the next generation of, be it workforce or even doing your bit. And I was setting up a school of public policy there. So there was a whole element of working with the civil servants across the country, uh, interacting with them, understanding the challenges that they were going through. And, if as an institute, there could be something that we could offer of value, why not? And I think that was a whole extremely enriching experience. So I can imagine, what you kind of went through as part of your journey as well. Um, you know, you shared a bit about how the journey to GovTech Singapore happened, but if you can also reflect on a bit, and if I don't know if you would be able to share all the details as much as you would like to, but if anything that you would like to share to the audience on how that journey from a typical corporate career to a government organization happened, and any experiences that you want to reflect on which kind of probably would have changed your entire perspective towards everything that you did in the previous 20 years of your career.
Absolutely. And thanks for asking me that question. I have to be honest. I hadn't, in the wildest of my dreams, thought of a career in public service. I mean, of course, uh, 20 odd years in the corporate, I had left to start my own coaching practice. And I would often tell people, and I meant every word of it, I was living my dream. The
Hmm.
freedom to work with the kind of people you want to work on, the kind of body of work that excites you, that was very liberating.
Yeah.
And the first about 15 to 16 months, touchwood, was any which way I slice and dice it, was a very successful momentum that I had built. And in going into the second year, and there's a there's a very senior leader in public service who is with the public service division, uh, which is in the Prime Minister's office in Singapore. She
Hmm.
tapped on the shoulder and said, I have a proposition for you. And then in my mind, I was thinking she's probably calling me for my coaching engagements. And she said, I have a role for you to consider. Uh, and I share the story often. This happened on a first Monday of April in 2019. The 3 days ago on a Friday, a very leading global tech firm, I wouldn't name them, had called me for a global role to be based in Singapore. I
Hmm.
said no to them in exactly 5 seconds. I gave them two references. One of them got the role as well. And 3 days later, this lady is calling me, and I couldn't say no to her.
Wow.
It was a simple matter of the government tapping me on the shoulder. It's a matter of huge honor. I respect this person. And I said, I need 24 hours. And she goes, what for? Uh, and my response was, I need to muster courage to come and say no to you.
Oh, wow.
And 24 hours later, I couldn't muster courage, but I instead said, I'm willing to have an exploratory chat. Exploratory was bold, italized, underlined. I just didn't change the font to it. Send the mail to her. She put me on to the chief executive of GovTech, and this was
Sure.
on a Tuesday. I had an exploratory chat on Thursday. What was supposed to be a 1 hour call, a 1 hour meeting, went on for about 2 hours 20. And that night, I
Wow.
received a message from this leader who would go on to become my manager. That look, I can tell you that you're meeting several candidates, but you're one of my top two already. And I genuinely hope you will consider this seriously, because this is going to be your opportunity to play a significant part in nation building and making Singapore government a very digitally sound government. I think I was telling you I'm a big sucker for impact, and that stuck with me. Again, took 24 hours, spoke to a few important people in my life. Incidentally, my former manager, my longest serving manager in my working career, and my mentor and now friend from Google was in town that day. And I called him and said, I know you're flying back tomorrow. I need some time. And said, come to the airport and we'll talk. And then I had a coach of mine, a former coach of mine, who'd taken on to mentor me in my coaching practice. And I
Hmm.
had my monthly conversation with him, which was anyway lined up. It was all stacked up. So I spoke to my coach, I spoke to my wife, I spoke to my mentor. I think unanimously the decision was that I should at least give it a shot. And I think by then they had all figured by my excitement that I would anyway go ahead and do that. So in some ways I was validating that. And then one thing led to another. I met a few more people. I met the permanent secretary of Smart Nation. I think the purpose really held my attention. So, and then they soon came back and said, look, you're in a smallish organization. You've done much larger roles. So we want to create a new role for you, which would include corporate strategy, all things people are culture and workplace leadership, etc. So I had nothing to lose. So that's how my journey started there. Now, there were a couple of things people would always ask me, how did you transition from Google to GovTech? I would say that the first thing that helped me was that I did not leave Google on a Friday and join GovTech on a Monday. I had a year and a half where I was working with leaders and leadership teams across different industries, regions, where I had by then gotten used to working with people who are not cut out of the same fabric that Google was or Googlers were. And that was a huge softening of the ground that had happened. The then CEO of GovTech who hired me was transparent to a fault. Through the process, he would just open up his strategy document and said, okay, here's what our vision is. And I remember in one of those meetings, I asked him, aren't you sharing too much? And he said, look, you anyway signed the NDA and I have to be completely transparent. Otherwise, how would you make a decision whether you should come on board or not? So it helped. The leaders being so open, so transparent, sharing. So I came in with my eyes and ears open. And then, of course, you bring in your personality. So my commitment to him was, I will never shy away from sharing what I have to and then giving you my professional advice. But it would never come with my ego. You can feel free to trash it so long as you help me understand why you are. And so that becomes a part of my journey. I remember the very first week, I had a Ask Me Anything session with my entire team. One of them asked me, what practices from Google will you get to us? And my response was, it could be all or none depending on what we want here and what is contextually important. So I think it's been a journey of discovery. It's been a journey. I mean, I was in an organization which was called a mini United Nations, 70 nationalities in the Google Singapore office. I came into an organization which was pretty much all uninational. In some sense, I was an outsider. Yes, I'm a naturalized citizen in Singapore. I was still a permanent resident at that point in time. I was coming from the private sector. So, but yeah, I think people played a part in getting me settled in, but I shouldn't have forgotten my privileges and then what an honor it is to be able to serve. So in conversation with a lot of people, realize that you're not here to change the world. You can play your part. Right? That was important. You're there to help. And every step, you require a lot of patience. You're required to understand what the context is. And I often say that when we hire people, we hire them for the content that they have already. That the context is missing. So unless we intentionally spend time building the context, and then the content and the context come together in making us deliver, we would not succeed. A lot of leadership failures and organ rejections happen because they would want to come on day one and change everything. So I took time. I mean, change we did for the right reasons at the right time, and then by bringing people along. So that was a massive journey. 7 months later, COVID struck and GovTech was right in the front and center of safeguarding Singapore and Singaporeans. I would often say that in our profession, in the people space, we do touch lives, we impact lives, but I would say we are not in the business of saving lives. My perspective changed because 2.5 years during COVID, being with GovTech on the leadership team, where every one of us worked 2.5 times, and we all had 2.5 jobs, but we did save lives. No experience, irrespective of how great a private sector organization is, would have given me the exposure to how the government works. the simple things, right? Why are there processes in a certain way? Everything boils down to we need to be fair. We be spending taxpayers' money, so we have to be financially prudent. And we are representing a nation with everybody. So therefore, there is a certain way you're expected to show up, especially if you're, I mean, every public officer, but especially if you're in leadership roles. So those experiences are amazing. There are reasons why things get reviewed multiple times, and there are reasons why after 6 months of work it might not go forward. But when I look back, we've had those experiences in Infosys and Google as well, so it was not anything different. And the ethics and ethos of public service is definitely different. I think those were the learnings that I had. So when I look at my next role, it's going to be in my DNA. So the leadership principles that I carry has expanded. So from a multinational which was headquartered in India to a global organization, I had a regional and a global role and headquartered in the Silicon Valley, to a Singapore Inc. and a government organization. The leadership principles that we carry, some of them are actually common. Language could be different, but some of those are common. But the perspectives that you bring in, and then you can, just as I brought in some of my practices from Infosys and Google, I'm very sure that I would take some of my learnings from here to my next role or wherever it is. So, and the most fascinating thing was about working with people who were all there for the sake of the purpose.
Wonderful.
Public service isn't about
Yes.
top dollars. It is the
Absolutely.
purpose. So the approach is very different, and therefore it had to go through every single one of our people processes as well. If someone's very stuck up about the salary or the levels, the titles, you already have a red flag in your recruiting process. So those have been the learnings, Gopal. And I can go on and on about it.
I know. No, I think each word that you shared is of immense value, and also was I was also reflecting on the same in terms of a couple of things that the things that you've said. Context is a very important part, and context absolutely has changed very rapidly in the last decade with the amount of digitization that has happened.
Yes.
And the connectedness that we have experienced. So it does play a huge role in the way people do everything today, and people practices need to evolve. And I often see that we are working with leadership principles of the past decade, if I can call, in many organizations, where it hasn't really been updated or factors the multi-generational complexities that exist. Any thoughts on, as you're at the fag end of 2024, there is definitely a lot more of change that we are going to see as a result of AI in the next few years as well. But from when you began to what it is today, anyone who is joining in the industry for the work that they're going to do, what would some of the perspectives and advice that you would share to remain relevant to the context?
Yeah. Couple of things there, Gopal. One is, you alluded a little bit to this already as a lead up to this question that you had. The careers in 2024 are evolving rapidly, primarily because the operating context is shifting dramatically.
Correct.
And I'm choosing my words here. It is dramatic. So let's bring three angles to it. First one is the socio-political, economic, geographical context is dramatically shifting.
Yes.
The causal effect of one world event over the other countries. And I often share this with my team as well. We could say, hey, we are a bit isolated, and Singapore is safe and what have you, but the war happening, the Russia-Ukraine war, has its impact here. It's not happening in our
True.
neighborhood, but has its impact here. Uh, the the causal effect on the markets have been pronounced and significant, as we've all seen.
Yeah.
The second one is, and then you already mentioned this, and I cannot agree more. For the first time, we're seeing almost 5 generations working together in a workplace, right?
Yes.
So there are
Yes.
boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and another 5, 6 years we'll have Gen Alpha knocking at the doors. They're probably
Yeah.
already in the
Yeah.
early, pre-internship
Freelancing
phase.
into the world.
Correct. It's because most organizations have begun to outreach to the students
Yeah.
in order to get them to their respective domains, etc. So we're already talking to Gen Alpha in schools today. And very soon they will be in the workforce as well.
Yeah.
This is both exciting and challenging at the same time, but also brings the focus to matters of inclusion and addressing conscious and unconscious biases. So that's a
Yeah.
big one there. The third one is much nuanced awareness about all these things that's happening, some which aids perspectives uh, and then informed decisions, but then there are also some perspectives that push fake narratives. We spoke a little bit about it, the armchair
Yes.
pundits, just attacking the social media, what have you. So
Yeah.
therefore there will be a need always for leadership, for the organizations, for individuals, for managers, etc., to the need for more responsible consumption and decimation of information, right? So that's the operating context that's changing. So organizational agility and resilience becomes very important. A culture of continuous learning and development, a culture of holistic well-being. Uh, yeah, I'll speak about mental well-being maybe perhaps a little later.
Yeah.
A culture of coaching. I'm a big proponent of managers and leaders as coaches as well. Uh,
Mm.
they're all critical because each one of them that I just mentioned has a role in managing transformation through intentionality and constant two-way communication that has taken center stage, and that's very essential.
Mm. Mm.
For individuals, I would say constant upskilling, so continuous learning and skilling. The half life of skills is dramatically shrinking. In tech,
Yeah.
it's about 18 to 24 months these days. So building social skills and transferable skills and intentional focus on staying intellectually curious will also be key.
Mm.
I read a report recently where I think there's a survey that was done in New York City and a couple of other cities in US where about 1,000 managers who were surveyed are all pulling their hair apart and saying that Gen Z folk don't know how to work, can't communicate, they're not social, and we don't want them in the workplace. I mean, it's a little extreme. My
Yeah.
question was that if they can't communicate, what were you doing in your selection process? If they
Exactly.
can't dress appropriately, a little bit of coaching, guidance, mentoring, and perhaps a dress code policy can address some of these things. So just don't give up on them. But that's the reality. Going back to our 5 generations that we were talking about in the
Yes.
workforce. So the social skills, and then they're not on our devices, they're actually in talking to people. That becomes very important. I really hope some of our younger professionals are tuning in and to take in the importance of that. And then for both organizations and individuals, and going back to your point about tech, I would say responsible use of technology is important.
Mm.
AI on a device. I think that there's a lot that we're seeing where it's become a fad. Everyone wants to, they're saying that they're implementing AI, but truly are not, or they're pushing the organization when the organization is not ready, people are not ready. So how do you look at the organizational readiness before you start implementing? In
Mm.
GovTech, we would often say that you have to think big, start small, but act fast. So there are
Mm.
different ways of implementing tech, but very responsibly. And with that also comes the fact of building awareness, education enough to know how best we can use it. And then there's a lot of debate out there on whether AI will replace jobs. My own perspective is that the work will remain, but the jobs might change. The future of strategic workforce planning would involve people and tech. But in reality, if you look at it, people who have equipped themselves, who know how to use AI, they might not all be AI engineers or prompt engineers, but aware of how AI can help me in my productivity, who are going to have an edge over people who have not upskilled. So people will replace people, which is happening even today. And so that's where the focus need to be for both individuals and organizations.
I mean, I don't think there is any debate on the fact that change has to be on both ends. Organizations have to start thinking differently than how they have been thinking. People have to start thinking differently than how they have been thinking. And I think in many ways, I always feel organization is a set of people coming together. So
Absolutely.
the responsibility lies with individuals to start, thinking collectively differently.
Yes.
And that's what is going to make an impact.
And to that point, Gopal, if I may add,
Sure.
Organizations, and I'm using it more as a collective noun, leaders, organizations will have to provide voice to the employees and listen to them because they're their biggest users. Which goes back to the point that I was making about organizational readiness for some of these massive transformation journeys and changes. Yes, you can't shy away from it. It doesn't have to be big bang every time. Right?
Yeah.
So how are you listening to your users? So voice of the employee becomes very critical, and I think that was one of the hallmarks of Google.
Yeah. I see your dear friend Manoj Varghese on this chat. He's written a question for you. Where he says, "Quick question, D N Prasad. After working together at Infosys and Google, I've always admired your proactive approach to seeking out challenging assignments. This growth mindset is a valuable skill that I don't often see in younger professionals. Do you have any advice on how I can coach them to develop this mindset?"
Manoj coached me. So when I was much younger, I was a young professional. I would, given that he's on the call, I have to call out Manoj. I'm in Singapore because of Manoj. I joined Google because of him. The very dear friend and one of the best managers I've worked with, and I've always been blessed with great managers, and Manoj has played a huge part in it. So Manoj, thank you for that. Like I said, there were a few things that Manoj told me when I joined Google. In fact, I was sharing with somebody just yesterday one of those learnings that has not left me. In any new place or new organization, he said, in his own style, also because we were friends, said, keep your ears and eyes open and mouth shut. That was his way of helping me understand that I need to build my context. And what an amazing advice it was. So coming back to the challenging assignments, Manoj is spot on. In fact, that's probably been a hallmark of my career. It started off by default, and then it became intentional design for me. I always had an additional responsibility. I always dual or multi-hatted. In a way, that was my way of growing and developing myself, because I in the very beginning I said I worked on multiple vertical assignments, so COEs, but I was picking up challenging assignments which were cross COEs or in a different group. For example, when I was in the US, 2002 with Infosys, I was in the global immigrations team. I was handling everything US immigrations based in our headquarters in Fremont. Thanks to our US head of HR, who incidentally is a namesake, Prasad Tadimeti, I got an opportunity to play my part in building the campus program for US because I had already done that and I was from that team in India. And then he also gave me opportunity to play a role of a HRBP of sorts in today's language for the employees in the West Coast. So that was great experience. So and then I think it was like once you've tasted blood. And I saw the value it was adding to me, and therefore it became very intentional that I was picking up assignments. So Manoj would remember this. I just go to him and say, okay, what's the biggest thing that's giving you sleepless nights, and can I work with you on it, or give it to me, or give me an opportunity to work with you. So, and then Gopal, till date, I've always dual-hatted, multi-hatted, picked up responsibilities outside. With my most recent 5 years in GovTech, I was the head of strategy and HR, so CHRO plus plus in GovTech. I was a public service coach with the Civil Service College, so in an opportunity where I was coaching leaders through their leadership journey across the government. And I worked with Public Service Division and what we call the Talent Development Committee, where there were a group of about 6 leaders uh, who were tasked to look at the future of HR for the Singapore Public Service.
Wow.
And then of course externally I had a couple of roles, and I'm still coaching, but that's always been so. Going back to Manoj's question, I I would possibly just show them role models and people who have benefited, and then show them the benefit of how what it can do to their careers if they pick up that additional responsibility or
Yeah.
additional hats, so that they're growing. Uh, our commitment in some way should be to help them with their lifetime employability and not lifetime employment. So
Wow.
I'm
True.
giving you all of this, and at the right time, it's natural. Attrition is very natural. Get out and win the world, right? So I really wish more professionals do it and see the value in it. I don't know if I
True
have a
that.
perfect answer, but I shared my experience
Yeah.
and how it's benefited me, helped me in my role, and then you also again magnify impact that you're creating. At one of the tricks that I would deploy is to give them exposure to people who've done that, and they can learn from them.
Yeah. And that's exactly the purpose with which I started this whole podcast, where, being able to listen to stories and being able to empathize with the journeys is one way of learning. And I think stories are the most powerful way of sharing how one can, change some of the perspectives through experiences of someone else as well. You don't need to make the same mistakes that everyone else makes.
Absolutely.
And why not listen to some of those through conversations like these? So that's the whole purpose with which I started. You touched upon a couple of aspects again, DNP, on how you went about designing your career, and sometimes it happened by choice, sometimes it happened, like, I think the whole GovTech experience that you shared was purely a chance that you in fact even um, took a bet on and made successful for yourself. We recently had an very tragic situation of a young girl within an
Yeah, good question.
organization who just passed away because of overwork. And this is one. There were a couple of others that followed later. One again, a banker. There was one more who, in fact, ended up committing suicide because of overwork and toxic work culture. This topic is doing discussions a lot in every forum today, and I don't intend to kind of ask the same aspect of what are your views. I'm sure there are views that you would definitely have, but I'm taking a view from an individual's perspective. I know there could be a lot that organizations need to reflect on and do differently, but I just made a comment earlier on as well that organizations are nothing but collection of people
Absolutely.
together, right? So I'm sure there are things that individuals can do differently to avoid falling into this trap of uh, going through thoughts and feelings of this nature, which eventually leads them to either take a step which is drastic as this, or even fall prey to a situation like this. What could your advice be for them as to how could they manage some of these stresses, uh, and you know, yeah,
So, we've been talking about individuals here, and
yeah,
the individuals could be the leaders of the organization, the managers, or the individuals themselves, the employees.
true,
So, if you would allow me, Gopal, I'd want
yeah,
to approach this slightly differently. I want to talk about what the leaders and the managers ought to be doing, and then
sure,
come to the
sure,
individuals
sure,
who
sure,
might be going through workplace stresses.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, of course, like you rightly said, uh, a lot has been being discussed and written about the specific
yeah,
incident that you're
yeah,
talking about. So we're not going to go there. Like something that you mentioned earlier as well. Uh, we don't build cultures, and by that I mean we define values, which are typically driven by the founders, leaders, etc.
mm, mm,
We hire people who share these common values, and the collective manifestation of the behaviors of these values is what ends up being the
mm,
culture.
mm,
Okay?
mm.
Eventually, it's all about people. It's not a single individual or a function that's responsible for it. But again, quoting you, every single individual forms a
Yes,
part of the organization.
yes,
The second one is some of these journeys are longitudinal in nature. And
mm,
anything, transformation, culture, culture of learning or development, leadership, everything is a longitudinal journey. Uh, how can, therefore, the leaders and the people function who can be the custodians of the culture make every employee equally accountable for it and that sense of
mm,
ownership? So we would say in Google that it's important to give them meaning, give their work meaning, but also the
mm,
voice that I was talking about a little earlier. So
yes,
there's that common sense of ownership that they feel for the organization.
mm,
I'll give you a small example. Google is known for its, the micro kitchens and what have you.
mm,
I'm talking about 2006, 2007. Manoj would probably remember this. We had a bunch of 20, 21, 22-year-olds who were just starting their professional careers. So in the micro kitchen, Friday evenings, you're standing there, and then they would empty a few chips packets and chocolates, etc., and they would take it in their bag and go home. But
take it home.
you would see Googlers saying, "Hey, that's not very googly. You can take one or two for your commute back home, but you're not going to fill up your pantry at home for your weekend with stuff here." But that freedom, which was part of the culture at Google, for anybody to own the culture and say that, but also for the individuals to feel that courage and confidence. Could be very awkward calling
True.
somebody out. So that was very important. So in a way, the voice of the employee becomes very critical. And I probably said this 3 times already today, right? Because I
Yes.
genuinely believe in that. So that all of that collectively leads to the culture of well-being or learning, etc., which obviously makes a good workplace culture.
Mm,
I'm a big fan of Bill Campbell, the
mm,
legendary trillion-dollar coach who we lost a few years ago.
yeah.
He once said, "Title makes you managers, but people make you leaders." So it is all about
Mm,
people, right, that we're talking about.
yeah.
And then, therefore, as leaders, from an individual perspective, as leaders, I would say we should lead, follow, or get out of the way. Right? And
Wow.
now coming back to the individuals, I would go back to the point of one. Um, it's important for them to find their safe space within the organization or outside. The workplace friendships can be very uh, powerful.
Mm,
Not everybody will have friends at workplace. There's
mm,
nothing wrong in it, but do they have avenues where they can go and share?
yeah.
One of the leaders
Perhaps
that I have a
when.
lot of respect for. Yeah, I was coming to that. One of the leaders I have a lot of respect for. It said a bit of a winch fest always helps. And I'm saying this both seriously and half
Yeah.
jokingly. But where is your outlet? In
Mm,
cultivating that outlet, and that could be family, that could be siblings, partners, close friends. they might or might not have the context of your workplace, but somebody who can just listen in and lend that shoulder. That's very important. So I'd encourage everybody to cultivate that. Now, the other thing is organizations themselves have a lot of, mostly these days, have a lot of platforms like EAP, for example, employee assistance programs. You have access to therapy. Going back to the mental wellness aspect that we were talking about, I mean, burnouts these days are very common because it is a very competitive world out there.
Yes.
So how can I, as an individual, build awareness about what is burnout? What am I experiencing? Am I there on that scale? And how can I therefore go and seek help? And that could be through EAP, that could be through a therapist outside, that could just be through friends. And different people have different ways of coping, Gopal, and I'm sure you will agree with that. So it doesn't all have to be. But if you genuinely need professional help, I would really encourage people to go seek that. There's no stigma to it. And you could actually be, you could end up being a role model yourself for a lot more others if you are vocally seeking help.
Yeah.
And two, it might be easier said than done, but that sense of ownership that we were talking about a culture of the place, but about my own experiences. Now, just because I have a certain experience with a manager does not mean everybody has the same experience. I'm not generalizing it, but my experience is real. It's mine. So can I have that conversation? Can we build that muscle to go have the conversation, ideally with the person who they're having the challenge with? And that's a skill, but it's very essential. Language plays a very important part in coaching. A lot of people would label this, oh, this is going to be a hard conversation. I would like to give them another language to it. It's a necessary conversation. I'm either having that necessary conversation up front and possibly helping the other person realize that, hey, inadvertently, I might be showing up as a jerk, or I'm sucking it up and I'm the one struggling. So, like I said, what are the avenues? If not the manager, can the HR team support to manager's manager? At worst case, at least people outside. And if you're not comfortable talking about some of these things, family, then there's always help that's available. But please don't hesitate to seek help. Is my big request. Not even advice, big request.
Yeah. No, thank you for highlighting that, DNP. I think the whole aspect of not being able to seek help at the right time is a big concern, and I can't re-emphasize the importance of this to say that it is okay to seek help. Two, there is no stigma associated with challenges that we are going through. And you will not have solutions to it unless and until you ask, even discuss. Probably you're not clear about what you're going through. So discuss that. Find avenues to, as probably I would say, vent. Find that social connect where you can do that. So these are a very humble request from me and DNP to all of you who is listening into this, who's feeling pressured, who's feeling overworked, and you're only doing disservice to you by remaining in the same mental state, which is not going to help either you or your family members or your near and dear ones. So please, take that first step towards having that conversation. But DNP, is there anything that we as a fraternity of coaches that we can do to support this cause or this challenge? Because I mean, there are organizations where we have EAP, but I sometimes have my own doubts about the effectiveness of that programs because not many people know the kind of what comes with it, and we live in a society where there is always a different way when you are talking to some of these consultants. And is there anything that we as professionals, coaches, can do differently?
Absolutely. So it brings me to a point that I made earlier about the culture of coaching culture in the organizations and managers and leaders of coaching. Now, let's face it. I know that there are a lot of platforms who are democratizing coaching and who are making coaching very accessible
Right.
these days, which is great. But again, you could argue about the quality of coaches that are available on the
Yeah.
platform. I mean, if you look at LinkedIn, uh, there's at least 30% of the profiles on LinkedIn who would call themselves a coach, what have you.
Yes.
Now, uh, the and no matter how many coaches there are, it will be fairly difficult for organizations to provide every single one of their employees with a professional coach. And I don't think that's needed as well.
Sure.
Not at every stage. So building that cadre of managers and leaders who could also dual hat as coaches, and we're not expecting them to show up as professional coaches overnight. It's a skill sets and a tool set that we are leaving with them through adequate training. We are all in different conversations in a single conversation. I can provide feedback. I can be your manager, asking you, directing you to do a body of work. I can teach you something. I can mentor with my experience. And similarly, I can also identify the moment and coach you. Even as professional coaches, coaching happens in moments. I could be in an engagement, in a conversation for about an hour, 75 minutes, but the coaching could actually happen in certain moments in that 75 minutes. So that's what we are trying to help managers and leaders evolve into, just that additional skill set. So when we are looking at it, one of the things that they do need to know is this adequate upskilling about identifying signals for depression or mental health
Yeah.
or burnouts. Now,
Yeah.
we say even in coaching, unless you are qualified as a therapist, do not get into therapy and counseling.
Correct.
That we can at least identify that there's somebody who will probably need professional help and extend that advice to them. Same
Yeah.
with managers, providing them a bit of a safe space. That's, I think, the value that we can add as a coaching community. So every leader that we are coaching, as coaches, if we can impart this awareness, if we can impart
Yes.
a bit of that coaching knowledge, and so indirectly, I'm coaching, and they're also picking up coaching skills from me, and then we could proactively do that as well. So that's probably how we can have a role. And of course, when we are in engagements, we're obviously doing it. The other role that I see coaches do is the outsized influence we can have on the leader who has an influence on a larger organization. So it's all adding up in the ecosystem. It's not about, again, it's not a, I say this, I'm a movie buff. I say this in half jest. Look at the last Avengers movie. Everybody had to come together to beat Thanos. So all of us will
So
have.
true.
It's not the days of a single superhero or one function, one individual solving world's problems are over.
As I say, we are living in the world of crossovers. So we are going to see a lot more, probably need a lot more of crossovers in times like these where, perhaps a conversation like this was needed to be able to even relay that message. So absolutely agree with you. I'm very conscious of time, and I had one very important question before we get into rapid fire. So DNP, you have kind of played a very significant role in the world of coaching, and as a member or invited member at the Forbes Coaches Council, you've seen the world of coaching and HR evolve over the last decade quite a lot. And we just made a comment on how coaching has kind of become a lot more thing to put it on LinkedIn. So how have you really seen these domains evolve, and what are some of the biggest challenges that a leader faces that we as a coaching community can try and address?
Sure. Going back to one of our earlier questions where we were speaking about significant transformation in the operating
Yes.
context. Well, I'll lead from that.
Sure.
There are a few key changes that we're observing in both the people and the coaching domain. One is the digital transformation and the integration of tech and AI more
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah.
So AI-driven tools that are being used, there's data-driven insights that are available, predictive analytics, and what have you. Virtual coaching has become a lot more relevant. In fact, somebody
Yeah.
was sharing an idea with me recently about how about an AI assistant who will be with the coach and the coachee, who's listening into the conversation and could prompt question to coaches.
Ooh, wow.
You never know, right? Somebody might be working on it already.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, I'll have no shame in getting some ideas for questions in the conversation, even as I'm all in and listening, etc. So that's one. Emphasis on emotional intelligence and mental health, and we just spoke about it. That's going to be huge. We're seeing it all around us. There will be a significant focus on that, and then therefore, uh, both for the HR profession, coaching profession, and leadership uh, on the whole, uh, the EI and the focus on mental health is not going to be a good to have anymore. It's a must have, and it's all table stakes. Right?
Sure.
And therefore, if you look at some of the development in the coaching world, we moved from leadership coaching to and then performance coaching, and then there's team coaching, but there's now coaching on stress management, resilience building. Health coaching is a big deal these days. Recently, I know a very significant coaching arm in Singapore started coaching for parents, and lot of it is happening, and therefore, that's going to be a big shift that we'll have to be ready for. The third one is the remote work and hybrid models. Uh, Even today, sometimes, and it pains me to hear that hybrid is typically taken as X days at work and X days from home. It is not. Hybrid is how do you seamlessly integrate the physical and the digital, or the phygital as it's termed these days.
Digital, yes.
And that offers unique challenges for leaders, for coaches, for managers, and therefore the second point I was making, the emphasis on emotional intelligence, uh, becomes even more pronounced and important. So those are some of the shifts that we are seeing. The biggest challenges, therefore, that the leaders will face are, one, of course, navigating the technological changes. And again, one, you need to stay ahead of the curve, but also figure out what is adequate and when do I use AI, and what degree will I push tech. And again, there is data from research that shows that 70% of the digital transformation failures happen because they didn't take people along. So any transformation without people is meaningless. Maintaining mental and emotional health. In fact, I was delivering a keynote a week ago in mental health festival in Singapore, where I spoke about leaders wearing three hats in cultivating the culture of mental health in the organization. One is as a role model, second one is as decision makers and strategists, and third one is as a custodian of culture. So that's a challenge, but the leaders will have to stand up to it. Again, hybrid and everything that we're looking at, so leading distributed teams, which also calls for focus on being more inclusive in small things. I'm on a hybrid meeting. There are some people sitting in front of me, some people on video. Am I paying enough attention to people on video, or am I just focusing? Simple thing, but that's also inclusion. So those are, and then as a chair of the meeting or as a leader responsible for that meeting, they need to look at some of those things. So situational awareness, reading the room, all of that becomes important. So if you look at it, some of these elements like technology, EI, holistic well-being, let me put it that way, fostering inclusive cultures, they're all intertwined, and one is leading to the other, and then comes back in a cycle. So that's those are things that are happening in the workplace for leaders, and that's what the people function and the developers of leaders and managers and coaches will have to grapple with and be ready to coach leaders as well.
Lovely. I think I'm just reading the comment. I don't know who it is from, unfortunately, which has come in, which says we have prototyped Joy, executive virtual personal coach for C-suite. Just the beginning of a lot of automation, AI playing a role in how coaching is going to evolve. But yeah, at the core, I always believe, and I'm sure you just alluded to that as well. It's all about being human. It's
Absolutely.
all about
Absolutely.
respecting the human on the other side as well. So
If I can just request the LinkedIn user who put in that comment, if you can
yeah,
just
I'll just check if
ping us your details on LinkedIn, that would be most appreciated. I'd love to see more of it.
yeah. I'm just trying to see who it was. We sometimes have yeah. It's a question by Gurunath Hari. Or a comment by Gurunath Hari, and he is based out of Singapore as well. So, uh,
I know Guru. Yes.
okay. So, yeah, probably worth connecting on this and exploring that.
Yes.
No, wonderful, DNP. We'll quickly get into rapid fire, which will allow people to see a bit more of you in a slightly different way. So, um, a quick question on what is one leadership trait you can't live without?
Um, I don't think I can do justice by one, so I'll go with three quickly: integrity, respect,
Sure.
and courage.
Hmm.
Integrity, respect, and courage.
Integrity, respect, and courage. Wonderful. Which book changed your career the most?
Early influences have been Mahabharata. Grew up on a
Hmm.
dose of that. I grew up very lucky to grow up in a household with three generations. I was the fourth. So
Hmm.
parents, grandparents, and great grandmothers. So for it, I always was intrigued by the complexities and nuances of the characters, and there's a lot of leadership learning and life learning there. At a couple of other books as I've continued to grow. One was Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson, where he talks about how he managed Michael Jordan and other superstars to six rings in the NBA.
Hmm.
And then more recently, as I started my own coaching development journey, there's this book called Mastery: The Keys to Success and Long-Term Fulfillment by
Yes.
George Leonard. Uh, I probably have this here. It's
Yeah.
always going to be in front of me. This one is
Yeah.
just amazing, life
It's a
changer.
wonderful book.
Yes,
I've read it, and in fact, I referred that into one of the conversations on the world of dabblers as well. So,
absolutely. And the most exciting thing about that, and the entire book is amazing, but the way he addresses the issue of plateau and how
yeah,
it is such a powerful place to be, but often scoffed at. I think that was
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah. Completely agree. And I think it's called always underrated in many ways.
Yes.
So yeah, completely agree with you on that. Um, Google or GovTech, where did you grow the most? I know it's a tough one.
Tough one. And let me say, at that respective stage in my life and career, both had brilliant inputs into my development.
Sure. Politically right answer.
No, it was not meant to be, but no, it was a hard one.
uh, Completely with you on that. India, US, or Singapore? Where would you which city or which country would you put the most favorite place to work?
Oh, I, well, see, two attempts to work in US. Once when I was 27, and the other time I was 43 or 44. Did not work. I didn't find US to be home for me.
Hmm.
Work experience was good. It wasn't home, so I wouldn't pick US. Again, India, Singapore in equal measures for different reasons.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, and I think each one has its own pros as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Describe your coaching style in one word.
Uh, it's more of a phrase. The coachee is the most important entity in the relationship.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Um, with that, I really appreciate you taking the time DNP, to join me on this conversation. Any parting thoughts for people listening in?
Um, so again, we're talking about the people function broadly, leadership and coaching. Whichever hat you wear, it's a great profession to be in where we can have real impact and touch lives. So the seat is already there. We just need to show up, own it, and take pride in what we do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, for
Thank
joining
you.
us. Your insights on leadership, transformation, HR, um, and also power of reinvention is was truly enlightening. And to all of you who joined in or who will listen to this later, thank you for being part of this insightful conversation on the Career Shifts podcast. I hope DNP's incredible journey and the conversation about nurturing leadership, scaling organizations, navigating career transitions the way DNP did it, his coaching journey, his entire experience of working in GovTech, and what he contributed towards nation building is able to inspire you on to reflect on how you can shape your own career and workplace with purpose and intention. As DNP highlighted, transformation is not about just managing change, it's about actively creating conditions that foster growth, resilience, and sustainable success. It's about cultivating a culture that aligns with evolving needs of people and organizations, ensuring we are merely not reacting to the future, but building it thoughtfully and
Absolutely.
deliberately.
Absolutely.
We are in times where the way we are working is changing and evolving rampantly. As DNP and many of my previous guests have emphasized, embracing these shifts with courage, adaptability, and clear vision is crucial to thriving in this new landscape. I look forward to bringing you more inspiring stories, practical insights in the future episodes of the podcast. Until then, stay curious, stay courageous, keep tuning in to the Career Shifts podcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. See you all soon. Keep shifting forward and upward. Thank you so much. Good night.